was young once long ago, I suppose. Newly married, I had dreams of having children and of raising a family, and of growing old with my husband. But alas, sometimes dreams are not meant to be. What is the old saying? Man makes plans and God laughs, or something like that anyway. I was in my early 20s when I became a widow. My husband had no brothers to take me as his wife, and I had no children, despite trying for 7 years to raise and to care for, and who would care for me in my old age. I was lost. All of the plans that I had, all of my hopes for the future were gone. The pain and tears overflowed. But then, as I sat in the darkness of my loss, something happened. It was remarkable, really. I heard the voice of God speak to me. Anna, my precious child, he said, I see your tears and I know your pain. Do not lose heart, for I have chosen you to be my prophet. Go now to the temple. There you will serve, and there you will witness the redemption of my people. I know it sounds presumptuous for a woman to claim that God spoke to her, and even more so that God called her to be a prophet. Nevertheless, when God calls, one must answer. And when I arrived at the temple and told my story, the priest allowed me a place to serve in the court of the women. I served here since that day, and I have watched all of the children who have been brought here. There are the young ones who travel with their families for the feast days, and they are always curious and full of questions. I do my best to answer them and to tell them the stories that I remember from my childhood, from the Torah and the scrolls that I learned. Stories of Abraham and Sarah, stories of Hannah and Samuel and Deborah. So many stories I passed on to them. As much as I enjoyed the young ones with their curiosity and questions, I get a special joy from the newborns. The newborns who are brought to the temple to be dedicated. They're so tiny, and yet every one of them fully formed, fully created in God's image. I knew each time a young couple brought their child with them, they brought hope, and they brought joy, and they brought an opportunity to redeem the future. And I took time to bless them all. I know that most people who know me, even the priests who I work with on a daily basis, think of me as odd. I am a childless woman. And yet I treat every child who enters this place as if they are my own. I'm a prophet who tells all who will listen that the redemption is coming despite hard times. I tell them not to lose hope. Most people really don't quite know what to do with me because I don't fit their mold of what it means to be a widow or what it means to be a woman. But I continue to serve, and they continue to see that even though I don't fit into their ideal, God's Spirit is upon me. And so they shrug and they let me continue to do what I know God has called me to do. I don't remember how long I've been serving here before I met another oddball like myself. It seems like I have known Simeon for my entire life. He came into the temple one day and I saw him and I felt a connection. Normally, friendships between a man and a woman outside of your family are frowned upon in my culture. But there are advantages to being odd, and one of those advantages is that we get to break with the social norms of our day. So we became fast friends. I'll never forget the day, though, that Simeon told me his story. He was sitting outside his home on a rock. It was evening and dusk was starting to fall. Everyone was going inside to their evening meal, and he was alone, and suddenly he heard a voice call out to him. "Take heart, Simeon," it said. "For you will see the Lord's Christ in your lifetime with your own eyes." Most people who he shared the story with laughed. They wrote the story off as crazy or as him trying to get attention and making things up. But I knew. I could feel the truth of it. And while we were both young when God spoke to us and we have waited these many, many years, we know that God is coming in the flesh. And we watch the children, knowing that they are all blessings from God and knowing that they all represent the hope that we have waited for, even as we wait for the one who is coming. Then, about a week ago, it finally happened. We began to hear stories from those returning from Bethlehem after the census. The stories were confusing. Something about an angel and shepherds and a baby. And then yesterday, that very baby was brought into the temple to be dedicated. Simeon was the first to spot them. And when he approached, he declared the baby a light to the Gentiles and the glory of Israel. And as I approached, I knew that this child was the one. Simeon and I had waited so long to see for ourselves. And I looked in his little face and I offered a prayer of thanksgiving to God and a blessing upon the sweet baby. Now, when I speak to those who enter this holy place, I add to the stories of Abraham and Sarah and Samuel and Deborah. I add the story of this child called Jesus. I tell them how all of the other stories point to him. I tell them how salvation and redemption don't come through a temple or a priest or even the words of a prophet like myself, but they came through a child, an ordinary baby, born in an ordinary stable, to ordinary parents, and that this child would grow just as all children grow. This child would learn just as all children learn, and that this child would remind us that to be the greatest in the kingdom is not about having the theology or the religion of old men, but about having the faith of a child. Thank you for listening to the story of this old woman.